Without further ado, lead on, Kim.
Tēnā katoa. Welcome to this conversation about plastic. It's complicated. You'll learn the downside of the product, no shortage of expert opinion spelling it out. Here's one from a book called Plastic, A Toxic Love Story by Susan Frankel. As Sam said, it's deep. It's a deep thing. She writes, a century into our love affair with plastic, we realised it's not a healthy relationship. We never considered the costs. In our initial infatuation, plastics draw on fossil fuels, they persist in the environment, they're suffused with harmful chemicals, they're accumulating in landfills, they're not being adequately recycled. In short, they exemplify short-sighted thinking about the long-term impacts of manufactured materials and represent an unsustainable wasting of resources. Yet, thank you Rachel, they are one of the foundations of modern life and in many contexts are a good thing. So, as the title to tonight's session says, how do we live with them? On the panel, Gavin Lear, Professor at the School of Biological Sciences at the University of Auckland. He's expert in how microbial communities adapt to pollution and agricultural practices and how changes to those microbial communities affect environmental health and production potential. He's member of the Aotearoa Impacts and Mitigation of Microplastics team. Rachel Barker is CEO of Plastics New Zealand, the industry association. She declares herself keen to help it transition to a circular plastics economy. Ian Shaw is Professor of Toxicology at the University of Canterbury. For our purposes, he is an expert on the impact of environmental contaminants on human health, especially in food safety and in plastics, and has investigated the involvement of microplastics in early onset colorectal cancer. I know. And Rob Wilson, Operations Manager for Christchurch City Council, owned recycling facilities. There are a million of them. He can tell us where we are and whether what you put out for recycling does in fact get recycled. Please welcome the panel. They each have 2 minutes to state their case. Gavin.
Kia ora everyone. So as a professor in environmental microbiology, it might surprise you to know that actually I quite like plastics. I flew here from Auckland on a plane that was full of plastics, which was great, because they're strong, they're durable, they're quite light in many cases, so I felt safe on that plane, and it was relatively fuel efficient for a flight. Given how amazing lots of plastics are, it surprises me how we treat them with so much disdain. So about 2/3 of the resins that we import into New Zealand, they're not used for cool things like making planes or great things for science. They're actually used predominantly for packaging. So they have a short life, then they're disposed of, and many of those plastics enter the environment. To put this into context, globally, every single year, the amount of plastics we produce in terms of weight is the same weight as 4 million blue whales. It's an incredible figure. So we're producing huge amounts of plastics every year. You might wonder why I care about this. I'm a microbiologist, I don't study whales. But when these plastics end up in the oceans, sure they cause harm to large animals like whales. No microbes ever choked on the plastic bag. But there's lots of chemicals, even in a pen like this, maybe plasticizers, colorants, UV protectors, and some of those that can bioaccumulate, they might be persistent, some of them may be even toxic. And when these plastics enter the marine environment, they leach out so that they then end up in the tissue of things like whales and polar bears, but they can also impact the marine life in those environments as well. The same marine life that captures half of the carbon on our planet. So it's a really big deal for us. What's the answer? Is it recycling? I don't want to bag Canterbury too much, but my understanding is that you guys are not even very good at recycling glass locally. The best that you can really do is to grind it up and throw it on your roads. If you're not very good yet at recycling glass, we really think that we're capable of recycling all of these plastics that are present in the environment. So just to summarise, I think plastic's fantastic, but we need to give it the respect that it deserves. We need to stop producing quite so much plastic that literally is just going to be thrown away. We need to be more transparent about the cocktails of pollutants that are within those plastics, and we need to be more honest about the efficacy of recycling. Kia ora.
Thank you, Gavin. Rachel Barker.
Okay. I'm going to do something slightly different. Can I get you guys to all stand up? Panel as well. Okay. So obviously, representing the plastics industry, I'm on the positive side for plastics. But just to get you guys thinking a little bit about where we use plastics. Okay, anyone who has given blood in the last 3 months, sit down. Anyone who uses a medical device at home, so sleep apnea equipment, diabetes, medicine pumps, those sorts of things. Anyone sit down there. Anyone who's had surgery in the last year, sit down. Whether that's day surgery, full-blown heart surgery. Okay, not too many so far. Gavin stole my plane example, so we'll ignore that one.
Anybody who's had a blue whale.
Okay, anyone who is wearing contact lenses, sit down. Fewer than I thought. Anyone that's wearing glasses, sit down. Okay. Right, anyone who's wearing a wearable, so Fitbit, Apple Watch, Garmin, Aura Ring, anything like that, sit down.
What are we going to win?
Stand and watch. Okay, so a few of you are doing pretty well here. Okay, anyone who used a laptop today? Or an iPad? Okay, and I'm guessing for the last few of you, anyone who used a mobile phone today? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, plastics are absolutely integral to the life that we're living, the quality of life we have, the healthcare that we are using, and it's basically increased human longevity by double over the last 70 years. It's a key part of our society. Despite the media rhetoric, plastics are not the root of all evil. Some of the other things like overconsumption might be slightly different, but they're not out to kill us. Do we need to use them more responsibly and make sure that we're actually not making as much, as Gavin said, but actually valuing that resource, taking it back, recirculating it, reducing how much of it we're actually using on the daily? Yes, absolutely. But it's time we stop blaming a single material for all of humanity's problems, which, trust me, plastics gets blamed for a lot. And time we start actually looking at the real root causes of what we're dealing with here.
Ian.
It's getting boring, we're all agreeing. We'll see. I'm not, you're probably surprised, I'm not a banned plastics man, but I am a toxicologist, and the way my career and my work goes is to look at the risk and benefit of things. And I like to weigh up the risk and weigh up the benefit and decide whether the risk wins or the benefit wins, and if the risk wins, we don't do it, and if the benefit wins, we do it. And if we look at plastics, we can look at their risks and their benefits, and I'll just give you some very brief examples of the risks and the benefits. And then if we look at these risks and benefits for each of the plastics, we can weigh on their uses. We can weigh out whether we should use plastic for those particular things. And you listed a whole load of stuff where plastics are used, but we need to perhaps look at the risk and benefit for each of those. So, for example, plastics are usually held together by plasticizers, and these are chemicals that help the plastics to be malleable and ductile and all the things you need plastics to be, so they don't just shatter into pieces. These chemicals can leach out, as Gavin said right at the beginning, and some of the leachates, the products that come out, are mimics of hormones, and they can upset the reproductive cycles of animals in the environment, and they can upset the reproductive cycles of humans, and in fact the human sperm count is declining as a result of these sort of interactions. physical breakdown in plastics leads to them getting smaller and smaller and smaller until they produce what are now called microplastics. And these are all over the place. They're ubiquitous in the environment. And some of the work I've been doing has been looking at their association very carefully with some cancers, particularly colorectal cancer. But these small particles can get into you, and we'll talk about this probably later, in all sorts of ways, and they can cause inflammatory responses, which might cause division of cells, which might lead to cancer developing. But also they can transport chemicals from the environment. So if these things are being made in the sea by plastics being broken down by the sea's waves and so on, they can pick up a lot of the environmental contaminants and take them to places that environmental contaminants don't normally go. Looking on the benefits, I could go on for hours on the risk side, but look at him, he's saying don't. He's got that look, hasn't he? Yeah. Looking on the benefits side, if you think about surgical instruments, without plastics in surgical instruments, we wouldn't be able to carry out surgery in proper, sterile ways. So that's obviously a very good use of them. Plastics packaging for some foods means that food safety issues are reduced by the plastics preventing bacterial contamination. So my thesis is that we should be using plastics sensibly to reduce environmental contamination and to reduce the human health impacts. And I hope we'll talk a bit about that later.
I just want to say at this point, in case I don't get a chance to say it later, and it goes to really what Ian was saying and what Gavin was saying. There's a book called The Seabird's Cry. I mean, this shocked me. I had no idea that plastics were this sinister. It's written by Adam Nicholson. Has anybody read that book? It's fantastic. And he explains that when phytoplankton are eaten by krill, they give off a gas called dimethyl sulfide, DMS. And when plastic is in the ocean, the plastic gives off that same gas, which is why the birds eat it. Anyway, just saying. Rob!
Yeah. Kia ora. Kia ora koutou. Ko Rob Wilson aho, e mahi ana ki EcoCentral. My name's Rob, I work for EcoCentral. I have a woefully inadequate degree and don't feel particularly qualified to be here. So, but blessed with a fast mouth, I guess. Or otherwise, as some people may choose to disagree. So, I come from a processing background in terms of plastic. So, not at a micro level, but what you literally put in your bin is what we deal with in our business. So, our business deals with most of the waste, the products that you don't want anymore. When you don't want it, you throw it in the bin. So that comes to our waste. So the maxim, I guess, that we probably push is keep it easy, keep it simple, or make it easy, keep it simple, and regulate. And the regulate bit always seems weird coming from me because I don't particularly like establishment, but I know it's necessary. Some of the waste actually could be avoided in the first place. So we can come right above the actual issues that might be occurring there simply by not avoiding them in the first place. And it's not just plastic, it's a whole range of things. So our view is that, well, mine is that plastic isn't a bad thing, but single use. And in fact, single use anything is a bad thing. So as a consumer, what you can do is you can refuse to actually buy things in the first place. Those unnecessary things that you don't need. You can think about it in the whole of life. And as a manufacturer, because someone is a manufacturer in the room, you can think about your packaging and your product for its entire life, from its manufacture and where the product is sourced from, to what happens with it when you no longer want it and the next person no longer wants it. it seems really simple, and it is incredibly simple, except for the change that's required in the way that we've chosen to do things today. And that's probably where the regulation part comes into it, is that actually it forces the change upon us. Because actually, unless we are forced to, unless our platform is set fire to, we don't often want to jump off it. So it's kind of forcing a little bit of change. And that change needs to put the responsibility of that product back onto the producer of those things, not just the end user or the end processor of those sorts of things, because responsibility sits right along that chain.
So once again, the consumer has to carry the load. What was the last thing you declined to buy on the basis that it was wrapped up into plastic?
Cream cheese.
Yes.
So cream cheese is that choice that you choose, and the product that I want to buy is not the product that I buy because the packaging is wrong.
What brand are you thinking of particularly?
When you go into the chiller section, turn the product over, and if it doesn't have a recycle label underneath it, don't buy it. But that's your choice that you can make, and you make that choice often enough. The manufacturer of that product says to the supermarket, why are we not selling this brand? I don't know, let's ask the consumer, because it doesn't have a stamp on it that we want. That's our consumer action.
All right, let's start from that point. If it has a stamp on it that we like, implying that it is recyclable, and it ends up with you guys, how much of the plastic that you get is recycled?
The plastic that is recyclable that we get.
Not recyclable,
Yeah.
recycled.
Yeah, so the plastic that is recyclable that we get, we recycle. So if it's presented in a manner that allows it to be recycled, your meat tray's washed, your jar's cleaned out, you've separated apart, you've taken all the
But we're talking
parts
about
off.
plastic, right?
Yeah.
Which is more complicated than
Absolutely,
any
yeah.
other.
Yep.
So, you get a whole bunch of plastic.
Yep.
How do you sort out which is recyclable and which isn't? Because we're all confused about that.
Yeah, that's right. So we use a lot of technology. Technology is kind of that beauty with that. We've got some great optical sorters, and they can identify the plastics that are recyclable, your 1s, 2s and 5s, and it can identify the plastics that aren't. And it can identify your coffee cup that you shouldn't have put in there in the first place and reject that. But it can pick out the things that should be in there. So the plastic that can be recycled, we're able to recycle 99.8% of it that comes through our plant. So we're really comfortable with that side of
All
it.
right. And then what happens to it?
So depending on what the product is, depends where it goes. So some plastic is recycled in New Zealand. Your HDPE, your milk bottles, both your coloured and your natural ones, they can be reprocessed back in New Zealand. PET.
Are they recycled or downcycled?
They're recycled. So a natural, your budget brand milk bottle, which is natural HDPE, is delightful in terms of recyclability. It has no colour in it. So it just needs to be taken away, chipped, washed, pelletised, and it can be turned back into a milk bottle.
And sent when?
And then sent to the place that extrudes it into a milk bottle.
Who does that?
So I think Fonterra make their own. But
All right.
Yeah. So that can happen within New Zealand.
I mean, the reason I'm asking this is because I'm confused about what gets recycled, or whether it's just greenwash, or whether there's a big stack of plastic somewhere that nobody's doing anything with because they don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that undermines public confidence in the whole recycling thing.
Yeah, it does. And that's a common thread we had in discussion just before about that same perception in the States or anywhere that you go, that all recycling is just sent to landfill. And, we're fortunate with the plant that we have in Christchurch is that it actually, all of the material that comes in that is recyclable can be recycled. And we sell those, we package that up and sell that out to the markets and they turn it back into a fair plastic, metal, or paper. It gets turned back into a product.
All right.
Can I jump in there, Kim?
Yes.
So just quickly, we don't actually do milk bottle recycling in New Zealand. They can do that in Australia. So,
So we have to export all that stuff.
if you want milk bottle, we do have quite a bit of milk bottle going into high value durable products, however. So the argument about whether something is down or not, for me that's a value discussion often. Just because something isn't going from a milk bottle back to a milk bottle doesn't actually mean it's a down cycle.
Well, no,
milk
but
bottle
it might
to
mean that it's not able to
chemical
be recycled again.
It depends what it's going into. If that's going into a polyethylene pipe in a stormwater system, potentially that can be recycled longer term. You guys actually have quite a good reprocessing plant right here in Christchurch. Used to be called Comspec. I can't remember what it's called at the moment.
Plastics recyclers.
Which
Who
is
thought that up?
makes it easy. Keep it simple, right, Rob? Yeah, they do a lot of recycling of polyethylenes, of polypropylenes, and I believe they'll be looking at PVC longer term because that's also tied up with the Mali PVC recycling scheme.
All right. I mean, we're familiar with the idea that plastics are, talking about milk bottles, right? Plastics are good because if they were still made of glass, it would take more energy to transport them, you'd be able to transport fewer of them. In overall terms, it would be a loss. So plastic is good because it's lightweight. But let me pick you up on something that you said in your 2 minutes. It's essential to our lives. Fossil fuels are currently essential to our lives, aren't they? But it doesn't mean that they are defensible.
No, so I mean fossil fuels, because of the way that it's integrated into not just plastics, but the chemicals production that we have for everything from cleaners and cosmetics to pharmaceuticals, it's the base of all of that at present. Saying that, there is no reason that a lot of those chemicals can't actually be made from bio-based sources longer term. There is action to start doing that globally, including here in New Zealand, but it's kind of at the start of it. Unfortunately, it's actually where you go back 100, 120 years to New Zealand plastics use, we were actually one of the primary sources of cellulosics originally. But we stopped doing that. Yeah.
I mean, literally, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
So we were talking earlier, Henry Ford made this car in large part out of soybeans. And then World War II broke out. World War I broke out.
Yeah.
And suddenly the fossil fuel industry took off and cornered everything.
So yeah, I mean the bio-based plastics is definitely on a growth trend, and we need to
Is
see
it
a
good?
lot more of that.
Is it?
It is, yes.
Because
I can't
it's
tell
got
you the
exactly-
numbers, but it is doing that.
It's got the same drawbacks as biofuels in that you're using crops which could be grown for food to be grown for things that aren't food.
So biofuels, bioplastics, I disagree that they're the same. Biofuels are linear. You take a fuel, you burn it, it's gone, that's it. The bioplastics you can circulate, whether that is, if it's a biodegradable compostable one, you can actually circulate that and compost it, providing, as Ian was talking about, it doesn't have any harmful chemicals that are going to damage the soil. Other bio-based plastics, so who's bought a plant-based milk bottle from, I think it's Metafresh? Anchor. Nobody. Maybe you guys don't have them now. We have them in Auckland. They're quite expensive, so a lot of people don't buy them. But basically that plant-based milk bottle is exactly the same material as the fossil-based one. It's just made from a different feedstock.
It also takes a huge amount of energy to produce these products. Like you say, it can or it will, if we use more, compete with land for agriculture. So there's an idea, if we took all the world's packaging and started to make it out of bio plastics instead, that would take about 50-60% of the world's corn crop. And the water that it would use to grow those crops and to fuel that process would be more than the domestic water use of the entirety of Europe. The amount of corn that you need to just replace packaging would be greater than the area of France. So it's a nice idea, but there are lots of people that are competing for these crops, for diesel, for ethanol, for plastics. It's not something that's sustainable on the long term. It's great for a small amount of use. It's not going to solve our problem long term.
There's a lot of the bioplastics are not coming from the actual food product. They're coming from the biomass waste. So sugarcane waste, after it's gone through, extracted the actual sugar, extracted the bagasse that is used to make compostable sugarcane
There's
packaging.
not enough of it to replace
The rest
all
of
the
it
plastics
goes
we use.
in, yeah. But you can make it from other stock sources. So in New Zealand, for example, we're looking at all sorts of biomass wastes in terms of creating new plastics.
Well, what we should be trying to do, I think, is to decrease the amount of plastic we need, and I think most people would agree with it. Then we're not trying to replace the current.
You're going to have to have both. If we can stop our overconsumption, that's number one. If we can't solve that, it actually doesn't matter what we do. We're going to keep doing this.
You talk about that as if plastics and the plastic industry had no role in overconsumption, when in fact, they're hand in hand, right? The plastics industry enables overconsumption.
Don't think so. I think it's enabled a lot of the technologies that we have come to rely on. It's quite interesting you talk about Henry Ford, and that was the start of mass production. He probably would have done that without the cellulosics. But basically, mass production came about because they wanted to break that barrier from the elitist, only the rich can have the goods kind of thing, to actually enabling everybody to have a good quality of life.
No, it's that.
We have the same thing now with
Absolutely
developing nations. They are increasing their prosperity, buying more goods. Doesn't mean it's right in terms of where we've landed, but it's kind of human nature is about more. So I don't know that it's plastics that enabled that, but that it's just that human nature is actually led to that.
And it's human nature to want to carry on doing exactly what we're doing without really addressing the issue. And
Which
I
is
was
where
wondering
regulation comes in.
well, I'm wondering whether the plastics industry is really doing exactly that. When you say, they're absolutely essential and they're not the real problem. Nobody's saying that they're the root of everything, but they are the root of a lot of things. And they need to. What was the plastic that, sorry, pick on you, but here you are.
No, you're not.
What was Plastics New Zealand's submission on supermarkets getting rid of plastic bags? The checkout.
That was slightly before my time. I actually don't know if they made a submission. Sorry, I've only been in the job for 5 years. I was on the board before that. But I actually can't remember what we did at that point, I'm sorry.
Well,
but certainly in terms
I
of
think
every other
what you
submission
did at some
recently.
stage was to put out a statement saying there were myths about the plastic bag that needed to be punctured. What were the myths about the plastic bag?
It would have been around the environmental impacts. So if you listen to the government when they first started talking about a plastic ban, we were saving the planet by getting rid of plastic bags. Eugenie Sage eventually started talking about...
Wait. Do not do the straw man thing. They did not say we're saving the world by getting rid of plastic. They said we're getting rid of plastic bags because they're a bloody bad thing.
And it's better for the environment.
Is it not?
It is, if you actually look at it from a life cycle point of view and overall environmental impacts, we are now using more plastic in those reusable bags that people treat as disposable. We're actually not so bad in New Zealand, but if you look at America, I can't remember the stats, but it's almost double what they used to have.
Because they're made out of plastic.
Yes.
And even though they're used more often,
yeah,
they're still discarded.
Yeah. So reuse helps, but if you're not reusing enough, if you're actually not reusing the right thing, you're not going to be saving anything in terms of overall environmental impact.
I think one of the most important things is the plastic bottle. And there's a huge number of them on beaches all over the world, and they're probably producing most of the components that form microplastic. And there's quite a lot of work done on that. And I think we need to focus a little bit on plastic bottles. But I think I don't know this, but I think getting rid of the bags has done quite a lot of good. It's made people think differently as well about the use of plastic, and made them think, well, we don't need to take our stuff home in a plastic bag, we can carry it. we can put it into a paper carrier bag or whatever. And that must, even though I haven't got the evidence, that must have reduced the impact on the environment.
Don't you think?
It's reduced the litter. Sustainable Coastlines has got some fantastic evidence showing that it has reduced litter. But how many reusable bags do you have in your car, Ian? Someone did a survey on it, and most people have over 30 reusable supermarket bags. It's like, that's pretty epic.
We used to have lots of that, don't we? I think the point remains that we put them in the bin. Because it has bad, but they used another once. And that's a very important point about recycling, is that we need to recycle them in a way that they don't get into the environment at the end.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, well, we're using them again, that's good, we feel really good about it.
Yeah.
But then you bung them in the bin like we did.
All right.
Yeah, which is bad news.
But we have to have a lot of faith in Rob
We do.
that he can recycle all that stuff and stop it going into the landfill.
And we have it.
And that's the whole of life thinking that comes with it, because a new product that comes onto the market might be, might have a really fantastic sort of lowering impact in one area, but if it doesn't have an ability to bring it back in and reprocess it, then it's no good. And if it doesn't have the scale that will support that, then again it's no good. The boutique industry that sits, in one small sector isn't particularly helpful because it's not there and it can't deal with the scale of it. So, the reusable bags, yep, they're great because they get it in people's minds about those sorts of things. But how do you get them back and recover them and actually usefully turn them back into whatever product they need to be? Not downcycling it at all, but maintain it back into some sort of, textile type of product. If that facility is not there, then you really need to question it, which is that design at the start. The rethink that sits right at the top of that waste hierarchy is critical. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen because we are recyclers, but that's the term that we all talk about. So recycle, and I'm really more interested probably about the microplastics in this discussion, but we get so carried away with recycling, we forget about all these other activities that occur above that part of the waste hierarchy, and I think it's important.
Okay, so you mean we divest ourselves of responsibility because they put it in that bin?
I can just recycle it, that's good.
Right.
I think
Why did you buy it in the first place?
also, Ken, we have to think about other plastic uses which are not as obvious. And, you talked about how many people are wearing clothes made out of plastic.
I was going to ask about the clothes. I'm buying this recycled polythene thing, but when I wash it,
Exactly. Yeah.
I was distraught when I heard that.
I've just actually been involved in editing a book entitled Plastic Legacies, and this is looking at the use of plastic in the world, basically. And I didn't know half of this. Since I was editing, I had to read all the chapters. And one chapter just talked about the amount of plastic that goes down the sink from washing machines.
Right.
And if you take, I look around, I see a whole load of these all these fleecy type things. And when you first buy them, they go into the machine and it washes quite a lot of plastic out because it wasn't woven in properly. The second time it washes out a bit less. Third time it washes out a bit less. Then a few years later, or a little bit later, you've been walking around in the sunlight and the UV light and everything affects this plastic, starts to break it down. Then it starts to produce an awful lot more fibres that go down the sink. And again, I'm into microplastics. I'm going to bring everything around to that if I can. But these are very, very important as components of microplastics. And it wasn't realised until quite recently what a huge component they are. And we don't need to wear those clothes, but we do because they're very convenient. And if I ask my students, and I sometimes do, what's your stuff made out of, they probably wouldn't say plastic.
No.
Because you don't think about that as plastic.
Did you, sorry to pick on you, did you buy that because it was recycled and you thought it was a good thing? It was on sale. It was in somebody's recycling bin, it was alright.
It's a University of Canterbury.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but that's true. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, talking about microplastics, is if things are biodegradable, we say that's great.
Yeah.
But is it?
Well, part of the biodegradation, probably you know more about this than me, so shut me if I've got it wrong, but part of the biodegradation process is producing smaller and smaller and smaller particles. And bacteria do that to some extent, as you know, and then they break down the small particles to molecules.
Yeah.
And that takes a bloody long time, basically. And the microparticles last for a very long time in the environment. And they do several things. they like plankton, and so small creatures will eat them, and they'll feel full and they starve because they're not eating anything with nutritional value. And they're even now getting into plants. Some of the foods that we eat, cabbages and lettuces, can actually have microplastics incorporated into the plant because they're so small they get taken up.
Does it matter?
I think it does.
Why?
I think it matters, and we're only just beginning to crack this one. There's often, something worries me is people say it shouldn't be there, therefore it's bad.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. But we're beginning to see that these things have been associated with things like colorectal cancer you mentioned earlier, I've been a little bit interested in. The association doesn't mean
What do we know?
causes it. What we know, two things. We know that in colorectal cancer there appear to be more microplastics. Now, they could be there because the colorectal cancer itself has trapped them.
Yeah.
They could be there because they cause the inflammatory response that initiates colorectal cancer. We haven't got a clue, basically. But what they can also do is they can transport carcinogens. Now, we do know that they do that. And we do know that some of the carcinogens that they can transport would be carcinogenic in a colorectal sense, or in any other sense. But
Can I ask a question? When you're looking for microplastics in that situation, are you also looking at other pollutants that are also in the system at the same time?
Yeah. And in fact, the work that's going on at the moment, there's very little fundamental work. We're just about to start doing some actually. Most of it's looking at the literature to see what other people have found, to try and bring it together and say, well, there is an association that's worth looking at. And we have to keep emphasising this. We have to be really careful that we don't reterm association cause, because it isn't necessarily.
So it's really hard for us to know what to look for. We've mentioned that there are lots of different additives associated with plastics. A recent study suggested about 16,000 different chemicals that are added to plastics, about 4,000 which we think are harmful, 10,000 we don't know anything about. So what are we actually looking for?
And these chemicals are added in order to secure the polymer chains.
For various reasons, sometimes to make it last longer, sometimes to make it degrade quicker, sometimes to make it look more attractive, for a whole heap of different reasons. But there's so many different chemicals added. What are we even looking for? We want to know what the impact this plastic has on our body or on the environment. We often don't even know what chemicals are added to these plastics. If I go to a manufacturer and say, tell me what additives are in your plastic, most people don't know, don't want to answer. It's not clear to me how to find that information. So that's also very worrying.
It's proprietary information.
Well, I think in many ways we can't find it, can we? What's happening in the environmental world, in the science world, and particularly in research, is that I said this earlier to some extent, we're finding things in the environment, and we're finding effects in the environment, and we're sort of assuming perhaps those things are causing it. And I was involved with a BBC programme recently where they were asking questions about coral reefs and why the coral reefs are declining. And we know that some of the sunscreens, for example, and some of the chemicals, UV protectants that might be put into plastics, can cause changes in the way corals reproduce. It doesn't mean they cause that, but it's a bloody big coincidence that they're going up in the environment and coral reefs are going down. So we do need to do that sort of investigation. And you can shove some polyps from corals into cultures in labs, and you can put these chemicals on and they do all the things that you predict. But you can't actually prove it definitely in the environment. So we've got to be very careful that we don't require absolute proof to make us look at the plastics industry and change what we're doing.
A question, I don't know whether any of you can answer this, but you know when you've got the dog bags and they're sold as biodegradable, so you scoop your dog shit up with the bag and you have a biodegradable bag with dog shit in it. What do you do with this?
You put it in your landfill bin.
What?
You put it in your landfill bin. It's greenwashing, quite frankly.
But nothing's biodegradable in landfill.
Yeah, but also you don't want to be putting dog shit in your compost.
And so it's bullshit. They may as well be.
Yes,
They
it's
may as well be
greenwashing.
selling me
Yeah,
non-biodegradable, highly toxic, inflammable.
yeah. It's total. That one is total greenwashing.
Wow.
I'm not sure that's absolutely true, because if you get one of these dog shit bags, dog shit in it, there's a shitload of bacteria in that. I mean, you can tell us about how quickly they might break down.
So there are some forms of bag that do degrade quite well. There are others that don't.
We know that.
The key thing is actually knowing what kind of material it is. And another thing to work on is, another thing to actually try and understand is there's a lot of trust. We're trusting that when people tell us what a plastic is made of, that's true. So getting back to those bioplastics made out of corn or whatever, and some of my colleagues at GNS did a study a little while ago, they found that about 50% of the plastics that we call bioplastics, it's actually garbage that were just made from fossil fuel and have that stamp on them. There's a lot of trust that a lot of the plastics on the market.
But how are they allowed to do that?
It's a big industry with a lot of links in the chain. A lot of our plastic, it pretty much all comes from overseas. It's really hard to test to know if these things are really degradable, if they're really from plants, if they're really from fossil fuels. So there's a huge amount of fake supply just out there that we spend.
That raises the other question, all right, that we are powerless in terms of the plastics industry. We are takers, we're not makers.
Unless we choose not to buy it.
Unless we choose not to buy what?
Well, not
cream cheese I can live without.
No, what we heard about before was how important plastics are, and I really agree with that. But there's a lot of junk plastic as well. So I haven't seen evidence of birds, for example, choking on your mobile phones yet, or your laptops. Milk bottle tops, yes. Plastic bags, yes. There are things that we can get rid of and that we don't need. And we need to stop pretending that they can be recycled or degraded. Or actually just don't worry about it because we don't need it in the first place.
What are you talking about? What don't we need?
Well, what we don't need is, what most of us agree on, is these single-use plastics. Particularly single-use. You know, one thing that really frustrates me, we need single-use plastics because it's going to make our food last longer. And I agree with that in some cases, but we make stupid decisions. We waste so much food by buying food, this is uncut food, in plastic, because we buy it in bulk, and then it goes off. Another thing that it allows people to do is it allows them to put a best before date on that thing, so that instead of looking at the apple and working out if it's good to buy or not, we throw it in the bin. So, if you don't mind me carrying just a little bit more, in the UK there was a study that looked at just apples, bananas, cucumbers, broccoli, one other thing. They worked out that if we stopped putting that in plastic, just for the UK population, that would save 10,000 tonnes of plastic a year going to waste. It would save 100,000 tonnes of food from going to the waste. So just by buying things automatically in a plastic bag, we're wasting 14 million bags full of shopping a year just for that, because we're buying stuff that we don't need because it's in a plastic bag.
What do you make of that?
I totally agree. There's an awful lot of cases there that Gavin's talked about where the plastic is completely unnecessary. We've got bananas. Why do you need plastic anywhere near a banana? Cucumbers are slightly different, unfortunately.
Sorry to interrupt. The other thing in that city was the cucumber, so that was part of that study. They thought it made no difference. They come out of
What are you saying about cucumbers?
They go off very quickly as they're coated.
In plastic?
Yeah. So I mean that's a waste of food basically, because they shove the cucumbers on the shelf in the supermarkets and they probably take 3 or 4 days before they go slightly yellow.
But if they're wrapped in plastic, they'll last longer.
Yeah, they're packed in nitrogen.
10 days, I think it is. Both supermarkets tried to get rid of cucumber packaging a few years ago, and they failed horribly because nobody bought them because they were degrading on the shelf in the supermarket.
But you used to buy.
Yeah, you've got to buy it before you eat it though. That's the issue.
Have you remember growing and buying cucumbers when you were younger? Thick skin.
Oh yeah.
And you didn't eat the skin.
He's right.
And they lasted. But
We've
now,
changed the cucumbers to suit the plastics industry.
I'd say change the cucumbers to save the waste on the skin. We don't have to be, we can be lazy and not peel the cucumber anymore.
That's right, yeah. And the chips don't have any grease now.
But yeah, this is an example I saw very earlier. We need to do risk-benefit assessments for everything. So if you looked at the cucumbers,
It's hard.
I do it because it's my job.
Oh.
So therefore they pay me to do it.
Right.
If you look at the cucumber, the risk-benefit is in favour of using plastic. If you look at meat in Pack and Save or wherever, where they've got cling film that they've wrapped around 25,000 times, you just need one piece of it. And you don't necessarily need that plastic thing underneath with the other thing to soak up the blood. You know, you can get around all of that. So the risk benefit there would be in favour of risk.
Unless it's chicken. They need all that
No,
Oh, just stop the
you can do the PET trays with those cool little shapes at the bottom.
Yeah.
Get rid of that
That's the
soil
chlorine.
pad. Yeah.
But wasn't there a plan that all PVC and polystyrene in food and drink packaging was due to be banned next year?
Yes, sort of, is probably the answer to that. So, yeah, food and beverage, PVC and polystyrene. The 2025 ban is very specifically rigid polystyrene, not expanded polystyrene. Yeah, this was poo boy yogurt. I'm going to name and shame because these brands, it's about time they change their packaging. Yeah, poo boy yogurt, your sour creams from Anchor and things like that, they're in your number 6 plastics. Those are the ones that have to change. PVC is often used in meat wrap and butchers and things like that, but also a whole lot of other trays and things like that. The protective packaging that you get around washing machines, fridges, big TVs, the expanded polystyrene, you actually can't get rid of that. There is no alternative at the moment.
There is no alternative?
No alternative. The options that are out there are not successfully protecting the product.
I mean, couldn't you use cardboard?
Every brand out there is trying to get rid of EPS. Trust me, nobody actually likes EPS on
Why
the brand
not?
side because it's problematic at the end of life. The fact it's so light and crumbly.
Yeah,
It
but
is
what
very
do they
difficult
care?
to recycle.
You know, you don't
Their
have.
customers care about it.
Do
Because the
they?
yes, yeah, oh absolutely. Trust
I
me.
mean, when
oh,
do-
we'll pay CPS. Yeah.
Who goes into a shop and buys a television and says, no, I'm not buying that because it's going to be wrapped in polystyrene?
You said that you couldn't buy television.
No.
Well, yeah, which is what our government learned actually, because they did intend expanded polystyrene to be in that original ban. So did the Australian government. Both governments have learned that our combined market power is too weak to actually get the global brands to change their packaging. If we were Europe and Europe put that in place, there would be so much research and development.
So it's
going
not
into
that
this
they
at the
want
moment.
to do it, they can't. They don't give a shit.
Well, it's actually, they are all trying. So, Fisher & Paykel, Electrolux, looking at the New Zealand, Australia companies, both are trying desperately to find other options to reduce it. Cardboard, once you give it a hit, that's it. You can't take multiple hits. If you think about the energy, all the resources going into, say, a washing machine, for example, and you think about the packaging is a fairly small piece of that overall picture. Now, if you change your packaging and it fails and you damage the product, it's going to get to the customer, they're going to complain, that product's going to go to landfill. That's just how that system works at the moment. So you're actually losing far more than you would just by having that little bit of packaging.
But I'm old enough to remember when we didn't have polystyrene packaging, but we still had refrigerators.
Well, that's because we made them in New Zealand and
Exactly.
don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
We also had protections at the border and tariffs and all sorts. So yeah, it's a completely different global
But it's not
system.
a good argument for using plastic.
Because we also got past the fact that as soon as we had bought that washing machine, that new TV, that new oven, whatever it is, the first thing you generally do, or one of your delightful children, animals, creatures in the house does, is scratch it. Which is the thing that all the packaging protects you against, but as soon as you start to use that thing, what happens to it? So actually, if we could just get past our mindset of actually going, sorry, you're going to scratch it anyway, so look, just, we'll protect it as best we can. No doubt. Am I going to do that necessarily? Do I want to buy a brand new pair of shoes that have got a bit of a scuff on them already because you're going to scuff them anyway? No, it's a real mindset shift.
It's an
But
interesting
there's
slant
some-
on perfection is the enemy of good.
Yeah, it is. It's not a winner, but sometimes it's overkill as well. You buy the washing machine, and when it gets transported, it's transported on a pallet that has miles of pallet wrap put around it, and that pallet wrap goes over a cardboard which is bloody thick, which sits inside, which has polystyrene inside it, which then has another layer of film put over the metal on it so that it doesn't get scratched while it's being folded and turned into a washing machine. So there is some layers that can be taken out. But Rachel's spot on. We are so small in New Zealand that we cannot influence Samsung to change the way that they manufacture TVs.
Yeah. Basically, the big global brands told us, because we actually ran a project looking at phase out of EPS and what products it could be phased out from. And we found a whole raft of small appliances, flat back furniture, a whole lot of different products. And the report went up to the Minister, and when he learned that, this was Minister Parker at the time, when he learned that, okay, a microwave, you actually can't get rid of the polystyrene because if you damage a microwave, you have radiation leakage. And your crock pot is not going to make it to New Zealand without it. But your toaster and your kettle, which right next to the things on the shelf, that these have to have it, these can get rid of it. Getting that messaging to the consumer and making that easy to understand, they kind of put it in the too hard basket. So they decided voluntary phase out and product stewardship, so take back of the materials.
That probably means nothing will happen.
No, we're actually designing a stewardship scheme at the moment. And we've got, so product stewardship for plastic packaging has been mandated. So the co-design...
By who?
By the government.
This government?
Our government. No, not this government. No.
Let's just see what happens.
Yeah, so when Eugenia Sage was our Associate Minister for the Environment, that was one of the big things that she did was declaring the 6 priority products, of which plastic packaging is one of them. So the scheme is being designed at the moment, so it'll be kind of like the soft plastic scheme, but mandatory. So the producers are going to have to pay into it, and all the costs of dealing with the recovery, recycling, disposal, what have you, will actually be put back onto the producer and then carried through the value chain.
Do you think that's going to happen?
I do, yes. I'll be very annoyed if it doesn't because I'm doing quite a bit of time on that with a lot of other people. So, yeah, when it happens it'll be interesting. It should be going in next year, but because we have a new government and we have quite slow regulatory timeframes, we actually have no idea. The design will go to government this year, but then they have to put it through, the select committee, the cabinet, all of that sort of stuff. Public consultation has to happen as well, so it could be 26.
And what would your association, your position would be in favour of it, presumably?
Oh, heck yeah.
Why?
Because it's a way of making sure that resource, because plastic at end of life is a resource, it's how we're going to reduce the overall quantity that we're actually consuming overall. Actually getting it back, dealing with it builds the scale, it helps the economics of it. The producers actually being responsible for financing that also means that they will be looking at their design. So like what Rob was talking about with your washing machine packaging and all this secondary and tertiary packaging, it will force them to look at the design as well to reduce what they're using, make sure they're using the right materials. All of that sort of stuff comes into play with it.
But there is still quite a big mindset change we've got to undergo, isn't it? Because plastics became so convenient before we really understood their impact on the environment and human health that we've just got so used to them. We've said that already. But you look at farming now, should I talk about farming here? It's dangerous, isn't it? But, yeah, baleage.
Can anybody tell me what happens with all that plastic that they're now wrapping up baleage in?
Most of it floats around the countryside as far as I can see, but a lot of it just gets dumped.
What is that recyclable?
It can be recycled, but we don't, but it can be. And it's really challenging because read the articles on it, because it's got so much organic matter in it. But the product itself is recyclable. Mostly it's LDPEs, which is or other products, but it's
LDPE?
Low density polyethylene.
Right.
Yeah. But it can be recycled, but so blooming challenging.
Can we look not in New Zealand? I mean, LDPE, that's the most common import of resin into New Zealand. My understanding is that we don't really have such facilities to deal with it, so it's nice that it can.
Yeah.
But in general, I think it's not. And so the baleage, the stuff that we take to the supermarket thinking that something really good is happening to it, in most cases, my understanding is it just kind of gets melted down.
That's the soft plastic, they have to put a special plastic.
Yeah, and that's the kind of downcycling thing. So we put our effort in, we think we're doing something good. Largely it just gets kind of squidged down, kind of heated together, more additives and things like that put in it, which I don't like that much anyway. And increasingly it's then put on land as fence posts or other things to slowly deteriorate into the environment over time. Personally, I prefer wood. So we actually have products now that we're putting onto the land that if they're not disposed of properly, it's like disposable plastic on land, and if way, in my opinion. It's not a great thing that we're downcycling things like LBPE, which is the most common imported plastic resin into this country.
That's what I wanted to ask you,
Not
Ian.
quite that black and white.
Why
We'll
not?
bounce on that.
Just 1 moment, hold that thought. Because with all this sort of downcycling, and this can be turned into that and then it becomes a fence post, that will just carry on leaching microplastics, presumably.
Well, not necessarily microplastics, because that occurs at the end of their life and they float around in the sea and they're buried in landfill and so on. But it will still leach as you put.
You mean you can't get microplastics leaching off a fence post that's made out of recycled
I'm
plastic?
being careful not to say no, but no. It's that will happen if something's in the environment and it's abrased all the time.
Right.
But what will happen is there will be additives added to the plastics, as Gavin said, and they will leach out definitely. And some of those additives, as I said before, are hormone mimics and have all sorts of effects. So it's just prolonging the process really. And I think, but Rachel will know better, that if you make those secondary plastics from a primary plastic, you will still have to put a lot of additives in them to make the plastic usable.
Yes. All right.
Which
So,
is the same in general for recycling as well. We often take things we recycle it, I think, thinking that it's going to be the same product, and we just recycle it and get another milk bottle or whatever it is. But the plastic is degrading every time we do it, so often we're adding virgin plastic to keep the polymer good enough, but also dumping more additives and things on top of it every time because we don't know what was in there in the first place. So your recycled plastic sometimes might have more nasty contaminants in than a virgin plastic because we dump more on top, not knowing
not
what's
like
in
there's
before.
nasty leftovers in the fridge. You know, like what was the original meal maybe 2 months ago? Who knows what it was? Rachel, you wanted to say?
Well, I did, but I want to jump on that a little bit too, because both of you talking about all these nasty additives that are getting added into everything, and you mentioned 16,000 different additives have been identified by the environmental NGOs recently. The global industry is actually doing a survey of all of the petrochemical companies that are involved to actually find out how many are actively being used to inform the UN Global Treaty on Plastics. And it's far less than that number. I think if you go back through all history, then absolutely you're probably hitting that number. But a lot of these chemicals are also things that we actually use in foods, in pharmaceuticals, in everyday other products that we use. Things like your food grade plastic is tested, it is known to be safe in terms of all the regulations that we're using. And yes, I'll give you that, Ian, the precautionary principle is not in evidence and all of that. But in general,
Well,
as
how
far
long
as we
does it take to
consider
get
that
best
risk,
friend?
it is there.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing about that is, which makes it a, forgive me, a rubbish statement, is that we're exposed to lots of these chemicals, and it's the additivity of them that causes the health effects, not the amount that can be reached from a particular plastic. So if somebody looks at a particular plastic that's going to be used as a food packaging material, they can say, right, BPA will leach from this at a certain rate and there'll be a certain concentration in the food. And if you eat that food, the amount in your body is so small it won't affect you. But if you eat 6 other foods with different things in that all bind to the same receptor, then they will definitely be at least additive. So we've got to think of the bigger picture.
We do, but that includes looking at things that are not just plastics. So I mean BPA, let's look at BPA. There is less than trace elements of BPA in the original polycarbonate that was made utilising bisphenol A. Most polycarbonates now use different monomers. You get more BPA from a receipt at the supermarket than you would ever have gotten in your entire life, pretty much, from drinking out of a
And there have been some
polycarbonate.
fantastic studies done actually with people who work in supermarkets, would you like your receipt, sir? And they've measured the BPA in their blood, and just a 3-hour shift, they've got quite high levels of BPA in
So
their blood.
yeah, don't touch food.
But I mean, don't forget, that's actually...
Don't touch what?
Don't take receipts.
No, don't touch the water.
But no, that's okay for you. It's the person serving it from. But don't forget, they are actually still plastics, because they're basically coatings for the paper. And lots of BPA is using coatings for paper and then for drinks containers and so on, and for linings of tin cans. And I think we've got to think about what plastic is, because it's basically a polymer, and they're all polymerized on the surface of paper or whatever.
Except that while all plastics are polymers, not all polymers are plastic,
No,
and
absolutely.
BPA is not a plastic.
Yeah, but
It is a
BPA
molecule.
BPA, well, plastic's a molecule as well.
It's a much
Now,
longer
I'll start
molecule.
teaching Chem 111 in a few months' time. I'll give you a call.
That's great.
Good idea.
Oh, great.
Oh my God!
Test tubes of talk.
Kim, I've got a PhD. No, but I think I take your point. That's the important point. But I think we've still got to think about these in terms of defining what a plastic actually is. And these are polymers of BPA, and so therefore by definition they're plastic. They might be short chain length polymers, but they're still polymers.
Can I just kind of bore you all by explaining one of my little science experiments that I undertook a while ago? So often, as I mentioned, we don't really know what's in our plastics. I've done an experiment before. I've taken a plastic probably about this much and put it in some water, probably about that much, and left it for many months, maybe about 4 months. I've then taken that water, which is kind of any things, whatever they are in the plastic, has leached out into it, and then exposed a microbial community to it. In some cases, that microbial community's behaviour changed, or the microbes within it die. So that's quite a substantial change, just from leaving the plastic immersed in some water for a period. That's the extent sometimes of the nasty things that can leach out of your plastics. I'd like you to think about how important that is for the microbes in the environment, but also the microbes in your stomach that are really important for your health as well. It's not just thinking about the microbes out there somewhere in the environment, or the plastics that we take in, and their direct effect on us, but their impacts on our microbiome and the microbes out there in the environment. They have unknown consequences. It's quite shocking to me to see a result like that. We still don't know what impacts some of these things associated with our plastics is having on our health or the health of microorganisms.
Do you know what it was?
No idea. Because I hardly know what to test for, and it's probably a cocktail of things at very low levels. It's really hard to work it out. It's not one thing. And that's what's really challenging for us. It's a cocktail of stuff that often ends up being associated with these substances. It makes
And
it
this
really
is
hard.
why you want to reduce not only the quantity but the diversity of plastics.
Yes.
So that at least you can
Yep.
hone in on studying certain things rather than being, it could be anything.
So reduce the amount of additives would be really good. Also these days we're getting really good at making composite things. We really like that because it's lighter, it's stronger. That's great, but they're really damn hard to recycle, if not impossible. So we actually need to go back to basics and have plastics that are actually simple, made out of simple substances that are hopefully recyclable and don't have too much of a diversity of stuff in
But
them.
how much of a problem is that? Rachel, how much of a problem would that be?
So it depends on which sector you're looking at. So if you're looking at packaging, my belief actually is there's a huge amount of action happening with packaging in terms of simplifying, going to mono-material packaging, and actually making sure that it is that much smaller range that we're utilising there. And that way you can also recover them and make them go circular. When it comes to products, so take a car or a plane, as Gavin mentioned at the start, and you actually think about all the different technical functions that different pieces of that vehicle or plane actually have to fulfill. A seat in a plane is very different than a wing, for example. There's different plastics used for different functions within that environment. Some of the composites in those situations, like the Dreamliner, for example, has got a huge amount of composites because they need to make it light and super strong.
In case it crashes.
Well, no, it's actually, that's not going to help you. It's to save the fuel, it's to make it light and fuel efficient. So, each of the different plastics utilised there is for a very specific function. So that with products, it's much, much harder because you're talking engineering materials as opposed to, packaging where actually the functionality of the packaging is fairly straightforward in general.
But actually, isn't it the packaging we're talking about, Gavin? Because, your Dreamliner isn't going to end up on a beach somewhere.
Well,
Forget I said that.
yeah.
It was a tasteless remark. But you know what I mean? It's the disposable packaging that we're talking about now. Why can't we reduce the additives, simplify the diversity, reduce the diversity of packaging?
My understanding is that it's actually not as bad as the gentlemen are making it out to be in terms of the additives in the food and beverage packaging. About your PhD. PhD. Yeah, so I mean, there's an awful lot of talk about all the chemicals are leaching out of the plastics and everything, and if you look at the entirety of plastics, you look at, say, some of the old flame retardants that were used before, like brominated flame retardants that were used before 2008, and I understand might still be used in some furniture applications, slightly horrifying. They were there to stop the flammability of that product, but those are very harmful chemicals, and we know that. But those still exist in our landfills and old products that have, any computer from pre-2008, not that there should be many of those around probably, but any electronics from before 2008, appliances are going to have brominated flame retardants in them. So, the chemicals are still there, but they may not be in active use now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, in terms of that new design, a lot of this is happening, but it's not talked about publicly.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, of course I do. But we've got to be very careful about not trying to focus on a particular industry. I mean, we sat here a time ago talking about pesticides, exactly the same. And we're saying, bloody hell, these pesticides, they're estrogenic, they do all sorts of stuff. It's the same conversation. But we need to get the industries together, because these things are definitely additive, if not synergistic. And we know that there are effects on the environment. And I'll give you a couple of examples in a sec. But we can't determine exactly what causes those effects. Like, for example, alligators' penises are getting shorter. And they're getting shorter because of a whole load of chemicals that mimic the female hormone, stopping the development of their sex organs, because they need male hormones, not female hormones, to do that. The age of puberty in girls is decreasing.
Where are they getting the female hormones from?
From the environment. From
Contraceptive, coal,
partly. And
plastics.
And partly pesticides. And other industrial chemicals, which is, I'm sort of pandering to Rachel here, because
there's a whole lot of things, that's right.
And if you look at humans, the sperm count's going down for the same reasons. And if you look at oysters, they're not breeding as well. I mean, New Zealand's telling us at the moment they've got some viral disease. I bet they haven't. Oysters around the world aren't breeding, and it's probably because they have a thing called intersex. So if they get exposed to a female hormone, they move to female, and if they get exposed to a male hormone, they move to male. If you change the sex ratio, they don't breed as well. So all these things are happening. You can't be happy about this. You can't blame that on plastics. But what you can do is blame it on a myriad of environmental chemicals, some of which are coming from plastics. So we've got to tackle them all. So we can't say, sorry, it's not our area. Not, you can't prove that.
I mean, are you worried that plastics are the low-hanging fruit in all this, Rick?
If you look at the waste side, we're basically the poster child of our poor waste management globally. And at the moment, we seem to be the target in terms of our poor chemical management globally. It's kind of, it is frustrating. I mentioned to you guys before we came out, I get microplastics anxiety. They talk about kids having climate anxiety. I literally get microplastics anxiety. I can do things around, closing the loop for packaging for products. I can influence companies to change their design. I can help on the product stewardship side in terms of working groups to actually work out, okay, what are our barriers for collection? How can we improve this? I can't change the microplastic side of things, so that scares me, to be honest. But the chemicals management side of things is actually starting to worry me even more. If you look at planetary boundaries, for example, we've blown that one out of the water. We talk about climate crisis. It's like 4th or 5th on the list in terms of planetary boundaries that we've blown out.
Well, I'm very happy that it's worrying you, because if it's not worrying you, we're up shit street without a problem. It's very good that it is, because you're the person, or your people, are the people that can actually make the changes that are really important.
Is there something in the additives that are put into plastics that there's an element of some additives are needed to allow the function of that packaging to occur well? Is there opportunity to find those additives that actually add no value to the function?
Why would they add them if it added no value?
I guess I'm thinking in the function versus form. So
right, like a colour.
Yeah, a colour, like LP bottle, which is brown, because no one particularly wants to buy the clear bottle.
But you can't cycle it.
No, exactly.
Because they're brown.
Exactly. They do. Yeah. So it's like I've got a shelf full of weed that I'm going to buy. Yeah. Not necessarily want to do, but that's a kind of so that additive doesn't actually add anything to the function of the packaging. It becomes part of the marketing to encourage you to buy that. How can you separate those products from the additive that allows me to sell my product This is the additive that allows me to actually protect my product.
I think a lot of that's coming down to the design. So what questions you're actually asking at the design point. And I mean, for packaging, for example, when we eventually add this product stewardship scheme, there will be variation based off criteria like that. They call it eco-modulation. So you'll have basic fee modulation, so different, some plastics are harder to recycle than others, so that'll have a higher fee just as a baseline. And then eco-modulation is about driving behaviour. So black plastics, for example, are a pain to go through the material recovery facility because they're invisible to the optical sorters. It's also much lower than life in terms of recyclability because you can only make black stuff with black stuff. You know, it's kind of the way it works. So in terms of keeping value high, you want to get rid of the heavy colours and
All go all black.
yeah, well, we have joked about grey being, the new black, because funnily enough, if you take all of the different colours of plastics with your number 5s at the moment, including blues, purples, blacks, everything, you end up with actually quite a light grey, which surprised me when we actually did that. But
What we haven't talked about is the cost of all this. The recycling is very expensive, and it's not cost effective in a country the size of New Zealand. We need government subsidies to make it happen. Is that going to happen? Across the board.
So the benchmark for recycling is what would it cost you to landfill? Is that so? Yes, it does cost you to recycle.
Yeah, but that's a rational argument.
Yeah.
But I mean,
isn't that what we're after?
it doesn't.
No.
I mean that kind of opportunity cost. It's
Yeah.
it's not an argument that works.
Yeah.
Because it's 3-year election cycle. That's what we're facing.
Yeah.
We have time for questions from the audience. You probably have some. Stick your hands up. We've got a roving microphone or two, and I don't know where the microphones are, but there are lots of hands in the air. Oh, the microphone's moving very slowly in your direction. Yes. So,
chemistry wasn't my strength at university, but...
well, we have a PhD here, so we're fine.
Good. I understand in Scandinavia that they burn plastics with high temperature furnaces.
Say what?
They burn plastics with high temperature furnaces.
Jesus, that's not good, is it?
Now, the question I have is what's the byproduct if you were talking about simplifying some of the chemicals that do go into plastics. If you were to rationalise them such that the byproduct of burning was safe, is there much work being done on that?
My answer is don't burn it.
No, don't burn
And
it.
why is that?
We need to be transitioning to a circular economy where all of our resources are actually utilised continuously, but we're not an extractive economy anymore. This whole linear take, make, throw away, we've just got to stop doing that. And burning it is a one-way street.
That's how it's
So it needs to be recovered and recycled, whether that's metals, glass or plastic.
We're putting a whole heap in landfill, that's hardly circular.
Sorry, what was that?
We're putting a whole heap in landfill, that's hardly circular.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, burning it does produce energy, which is obviously a good end
Exactly.
result. The difficulty is, again, we don't know what's in some of these plastics to the degree we don't know what's going to come out. If you have really clean plastic going in, it could be a useful feedstock to produce energy as you burn it off. But in general, it has so much junk added to it that it's in many cases not safe. I would not want to live by one of those places burning that plastic.
But I suppose that's my point. If we were to only burn, if we were to produce plastics that we could burn and produce CO2 and water, then that would be a great way to harvest the energy value.
Yeah, and there's a good point. Even though my PhD is not in chemistry, I do know about this. And if it means certain plastics...
Now you tell me, what are you here for?
I didn't tell them. I'm not going to do anything for the food, basically. But if you burn plastics that contain chlorine at a too low temperature, then you'll produce dioxins, and these are highly carcinogenic. And what they did in Sweden, I think it was you're talking about, I was a bit involved in this some years ago, they used really high temperatures, so the products are hydrogen chloride, carbon dioxide, ammonia, I think, and water. I'm not saying this is good, but if you're going to burn plastics, they've got to be done at incredibly high temperature, which uses a lot of energy to do it. And so you've got to get the energy balance right, that you're putting out enough energy, and you're not using so much of it to actually burn the plastics. And then it depends whether you're trying to use the burning process to just get rid of the plastic with a byproduct of energy. And I don't think that's the right thing to do, which is sort of what you said, Gavin.
Don't you ever think that, I mean, we're dogged by unintended consequences of what we've done in the past.
Yeah.
And we're so aware now of the potentially unintended consequences that we just can't do anything. You know, we're just stuck. Anyway.
But Kim, I think we've got to accept that by living, we're going to impact our environment. We've just got to minimise it. We're not going to completely reduce it, we can't. We've got to minimise it. And I think we've got to think about that all the time, and how can we minimise it?
Who's got the mic? Yes.
I don't know who the question's for, but keeping in mind the microplastics, is there such a thing as compostable plastics? And also, my new friend here, plastic-eaten insects or worms.
Insects, did you say, or enzymes?
Insects.
Can I comment on the plastic-eating insect? So I do a lot of work that focuses on microbes that can degrade plastics with generally not much success, to be honest. There's been a big fanfare about different insects that can eat plastic, so you can see these worms that go through expanded polystyrene, for example. They do a great job of making it smaller, but all they're really doing is chewing it up and pooping out microplastics. Very little evidence it's really that effective.
What you can't see is okay.
So is there such thing as compostable plastic? Because obviously there's a lot of greenwashing and everyone says their bags are compostable, home compostable. Is there such
Do they say home
They
compostable?
say home compostable on the packaging. So what, can we not hold them accountable?
So the trick there is looking for a certification and making sure it has a certification number on it. Like I'm assuming the GMS study was probably a whole lot where there's some dodgy looking certifications on them. I've actually traced a few back and then gone back to the company and said you need to stop claiming that, otherwise I'm going to report you. So if it's an actual recognised, like the seedling logo, sorry, I'm having a mental blank. There's a range of international composting certifications.
There's no regulation in New Zealand though, is there? There's no certification in New Zealand. So
No,
we go
so
by
we
there.
tend to point to the European, the US and the Australian one, and the Australian one in particular because they also have a worm toxicity test. But what they're actually doing when they're doing, because they do a whole lot of different tests, there's biodegradation, there's a size, like a particulate sort of little one, there's a, God, again, having a mental blank. It's called the long weekend, kicking in early. They do a growth test with literally the seedlings and things growing in the soil, we'll compost from it, and then they do the sperm toxicity one with the Australian one. But they're actually measuring how much of it has turned into CO2 at the end of the degradation test. So they are actually measuring the overall degradation. The trick there though is that it's only 95% degradation that they have to meet. So depending on your additives that might be in it, any inks that might be on it, it's a bit hard to tell what's in that 5%. So personally I think there's a bit more research needs to go into that. But in general, if it's a certified compostable one, it's considered okay. The challenge is what's actually happening with it. If you're like the dog poop bag, right? Compostable dog poop bag, it might be genuinely compostable. But if there's no composting system for that to go into, it's meaningless.
Yeah. And I'm not putting it in my compost pile.
Also, we've got to think about how, and I'm going to stray into your ground now, Gavin, so shut me up if I get it wrong, but you know, the way bacteria break down plastic, you imagine the plastic molecule is the great long polymer, and the bacteria aren't necessarily, I know there are some that do, just chewing it away at the end. They're going to chop it up into pieces. So when they're chopping it up into pieces, they're actually producing the small fragments that produce microplastics. Now, if they're all contained in an area, and you leave the bacteria going at them, they'll presumably break the whole thing down to carbon dioxide and water. But if they're not, and there's leaching of water going through this system, then the small fragments will get washed out. So the process that you're composting is really, the process you're using to compost is really important, I think. Right? Does that sound reasonable, Gavin?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of those compostable bags, I think they do work pretty well, although they might not be entirely compostable, might be elements of it that don't get graded. They introduce roadside collection for compost in Auckland recently. My bag doesn't last more than a few days before it's falling apart. So I think that's quite a good sign. But there are other kinds of bags. I don't remember a few years ago we had bags which were oxo-degradable. So they often had a green frog on them, our shopping bags, and everyone was buying those. And they were just bags that were designed to break down quickly, not to be degraded, but to break into small particles. So that's the balance. You don't want it to degrade into small particles and stop. Let's make it
But
microplastics.
who thought that was a good idea?
A whole lot of people that spread out across the country. Very.
That seems like the worst idea.
Oh, it was horrific, quite frankly, from where I'm sitting. We actually, us and Wasteman's, we're the Waste Management Institute, so the association for the waste guys, the councils, etc. We actually asked the Ministry for the Environment to put oxo-degradables on the ban list because they are so bad. Like, just, yeah, not bad.
I suppose you've got to be able to distinguish between marketing and science.
Yes.
Because a lot of marketing, I mean, you look at BPA and the marketing around BPA-free containers meant that containers sold better. Whether that was right or wrong, I don't know, but they certainly sold better.
Also, I feel like around the marketing of recycling, we don't necessarily need to subsidise, maybe we do, but not necessarily need to subsidise lots more in terms of recycling or new ways to do things. What we need is to educate people more to understand that things can't be recycled, and that gets, like at the moment we still have this horrible chasing triangles thing that we have on all of our stuff that's made out of plastic, and we look at it and we think that's recyclable, and the vast majority of it isn't. And so if people were actually honest with us, we could then make informed decisions, and a large part of the problem is that we've been treated for fools. We have all this weird greenwashing stuff. We don't know what's going on, and a lot of us ending up using more plastics because we just think it's being recycled, and it would be much better if people said no, this is not what's happening.
They've tried to rationalise it. They've tried to make it the same throughout the country, and the numbers are
1s, 2s and 5s.
1s, 2s and 5s, and then go 1, 2 and 5, then it's not recyclable. Is that not easy to understand when you say 1, 2s and 5s are not even recyclable?
I think that's still quite hard. Some people were just starting to get used to that, but also understanding that maybe you might have that number slapped on something, but if you're not going to clean it properly or dispose of it in exactly the right way, if it's too big, if it's too small, it's not going to be recycled. Just because you put it in that bin, even with that number on it, if it's too big, too small, contaminated, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, although having national standardisation does mean that we can actually run education programs nationally, which we have.
Because I think confusion is the biggest problem here.
Yes.
There was another question. Yeah, there's things all over the place.
This is mainly directed towards Rachel, but it's kind of to do with why is circularity put ahead of reducing your waste in the first place? It seems like that's kind of the stance you've taken tonight, which seems interesting, given we know recycling is obviously not very effective within New Zealand, and we've got a lot of scientists in the room who understand that there are issues associated to plastic. And so I'm just trying to understand why you seem to be promoting circularity and reduction.
A recycling economy is not a circular economy.
Can you explain what you mean
so
by
a circular economy, you are starting at the top of the waste hierarchy. So you actually need to be looking at reduction, rethinking, redesigning, and making sure things are circulating. So that's where like your reuse, your refill models come in, your complete change of business model around ownership, all of that sort of stuff.
What is being done by Plastics NZ at the moment to reduce them from the top?
So we've been running a circular economy program for the last 3 years, which has been government funded, and there's 3 different elements of that. One is an actual education program called Red Plastics, which is specifically about training on circular economy for plastics, and that's aimed at brands primarily.
And what?
At brand owners. So, those who are actually putting it on the market, helping them to redesign and look at the different options there. We've been running a design advisory which has had co-funding available, where a circular economy consultant or a sustainability consultant or a technical plastics, depending on what's needed, can actually come in and look at where is the opportunity to improve their circularity, redesign, rethink their models, that sort of thing, and actually close the loop there. And then we've been running national working groups on things like your number 5 plastics. You go back 3-4 years, most of the councils were starting to move away from that because they thought that it wasn't recyclable. I was sitting there going, what the heck, we're importing recycled polypropylene into the country. I know we have an end market for it. The waste management guys were telling the councils that it wasn't recyclable. I was like, hey, there's something wrong here. You know, we've got an issue, and basically we managed to close the loop on that one. So, you know, we've been looking at different things there. So that's basically what we've been doing around that.
That people will be suspicious of greenwashing, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Are you confident that that's not any part of what you're doing?
Totally not part of what we're doing. In fact, myself and a couple of other girls in different associations run a shared Google spreadsheet where we identify greenwashing examples and then hit them in one way or other, whether that is just direct personal, hey, you need to change this, or actually reporting through to the Commerce Commission. So, yeah, greenwashing is definitely not something I'm in support of. Yeah.
I don't know who's got the microphone, but whoever it is, ask the question.
So the question I think for Rob, but probably runs across the whole panel, but Kim, you asked earlier, right at the beginning of the session, about how much Rob's facilities are able to recycle. I'm not sure, Rob, that whether you were able to answer it, but what percentage of, say, the annual volume of plastic that we think we're going to get recycled doesn't actually go through that recycling process and gets rejected for whatever reason, whether it's contaminated, whether it's the wrong plastic, it's too small. And I know that some of the plastic containers that do have one on it, and I can wash out a little tomato container or something else that something has been sold to me from one of the supermarkets, but the label on it is not recyclable, and it's very difficult to come on. So does that mean that that entire container then gets rejected because it's got a non-recyclable plastic label on it, even though I think it actually should be recycled? You guys have got all the technology there, surely you can separate that. How much of it really actually gets recycled on a tonnage basis or a percentage basis?
Yeah, sure. So of the material that comes through our facility, less than 10% of it is actually plastic. So in your bin, less than 10% of that is actually plastic. And
But you just want to know about...
We're talking about plastic.
Yeah,
so the tonnage of plastic that you get, that we think we put in there to be recycled, how much gets rejected and how much gets recycled, and you know, whether it's put back into the recycling circular process, which I'm really not very sure of really at the moment in the way things are happening, but yeah, I'm really keen to understand those sort of numbers.
Yeah, so absolutely. So the percentage of stuff that actually, what gets rejected out of plastic that is compliant in terms of the 1s, 2s and 5s is the dark colours. So the blacks that come through. Non-compliant stuff also comes through, so that gets included in the waste product that comes through. And I think of what we call our waste plastic, it is a very, very small proportion. So 10% of that is plastic, of everything that comes through. And of our waste product, which sits at about 10%, you're well under 1%. And I couldn't give you that exact number. So it's a very, very small proportion. Once you get good plastic into a system like ours, you can extract it.
But can I also add just a quick answer in that question as well? I think globally about 9% of plastic we think is recycled. In New Zealand, again, the most common plastic that we import as a resin is LDPE. That's about a third of the plastic that we import. We can't really recycle that, so it's not great news.
That's not true, Gavin.
So
that is not true.
It's not true that we're not recycling it.
So an awful lot of the polyethylene that's coming into the country is going into multiple different products, from medical devices which are exported to pipes which are actually going in situ.
So that's why I think
get
it's
recycled.
recycling kind of thing.
A lot of the post-industrial LDPE is recycled. The problematic stuff is, we were talking about the plastics before. A lot of that is being collected under product stewardship now and is getting recycled, not in New Zealand unfortunately, but there is activity to look at bringing that onshore, washing it and recovering it.
So the government report, I think last year, suggested in New Zealand about 10% of the polymer that we import is actually recycled.
Yeah. We don't know is actually the answer. So in terms of your...
We're doing really well then, aren't we? So.
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of your resource recovery facilities like EcoCentral, overall for New New Zealand, the contamination rate is between 10 and 15% typically. That's across all resources, so you can kind of extract.
You mean dirty?
Yes, yeah. Dirty or the wrong stuff, like people wish cycling, putting toys in, all that sort of thing. You will get some losses at the actual reprocessing plants. So, you look at your fruit punnet with its label, that will go to Flight Plastics in Wellington. The label gets washed off in the process. It will actually separate, and because it's a different material, it floats free.
Not every label does. I know because I work in the labelling industry, and I know that there is a high proportion of producers that put product into our supermarkets that just purely based on costs, they will not put a label on a plastic product because it's going to raise the price. And it's as simple as that. It's just down to pure economics from the producer.
You're talking IMD labels. You're talking direct print can't come off.
No, I'm talking about adhesive labels. They come on a backing sheet, they're put on by a label applicator. They could choose to do something which is more responsible, but they don't based on costs.
I would certainly push back on you.
Supermarket.
Why are you selling them stuff that can't go through and be processed off?
I would do everything I could to try and get them to purchase things. As soon as you tell somebody that something's 4 times the price, they immediately go, no thanks.
Yeah. So
and
some
so
of
that's the producers, you give them the options.
Yeah. Some of my packaging manufacturing members actually made the decision. So the ban on, the original ban on the PVC mini trays and what have you, the manufacturers in New Zealand actually didn't care too much about those bans because they were already away from those materials predominantly. It was a very, very tiny amount that was still being made. And some of them had made a deliberate decision to move away from those materials and actually drop customers because that they were refusing to go to the new material. So, there's actually every piece of the system has to change. It's all the way through. So, yeah.
The label on that PET, strawberry punnet, doesn't affect our ability to separate it.
Right.
And it doesn't affect our ability to then go and sell it to market, providing that it's clean enough to get it through. It's other products that come in there that will impact on it. So a small bit of labelling is not the end of the world. Yes, there's definitely better things you can do with it, but it's not the end of the world on either.
Full sleeve labels, on the other hand, really problematic.
They are, but then the processes that deal with some of those things also have systems whereby they extract those sleeves. So it is possible. It is certainly preferable not to have them.
Let's get some more questions. Yes, who's got Mike?
Kia ora tātou. Thank you very much for a great discussion. I've been to several of these Kimhill debates, and it seems like we need not to be tinkering around the edges but start looking at fundamental solutions. We talked about circular economies. I think we need to get far lower down the waste management hierarchy, well below recycling, well below reusing even, and down to redesign and avoiding consumption in the first place.
I knew you wanted to overturn capitalism.
Basically, yes. But I mean, let's ask ourselves, some of us are old enough to remember when you bought bottles,
yes,
you bought drinks, it was in glass bottles, you returned them. We don't need to create all this waste. We're throwing billions of bottles, plastic bottles into the ocean.
Can I formulate a question for you?
So the question is, Kim, what is the panel's response to actually going to the very fundamentals and questioning the very consumptive society that we have today that is producing not only problems with plastics but problems with everything, whether it's climate, whether it's biodiversity, whether it's plastic,
You mean short of handling, do they have a solution? We can ask. Gavin.
I think you already answered the question. It's going back to basics. It's doing what we used to do, using less plastic, washing things instead of throwing it in the bin.
I don't have a magic wand. Much as I would love to solve those problems, that is not actually something I can solve on my own. I'm frustrated by the fact that we exist in this system where GDP growth drives everything, where growth is the goal. you can't go circular if growth is the goal. I had a conversation with David Parker at one point around, how did he expect us to go circular while we were still aiming for GDP growth? And he genuinely believed that that was possible, whereas I fundamentally don't believe that that is possible. So, it's hard, but yeah, I don't have a magic wand, so I do what I can do in my job, and I influence what I can influence, and kind of just have to stick within that.
I think your question about fundamental considerations and fundamental research, there's a lot of fundamental research out there, but it's actually getting that fundamental research translated into a way that on this occasion the plastics industry will listen to. And the big problem always, and I'm often very guilty of this, is that you can't prove that link. And so therefore, you can't prove it. But the evidence is so strongly in favour of the chemicals from plastics causing environmental harm and human health effects. But then, as you say, it's not only plastics, it's other things. Well, if we stop looking at all of these things together, which is the point I think you were making, we're going to make a very, very big mistake, I think. So we mustn't forget that fundamental research, which is definitely showing implications of plastics on the environment and human health.
Wrong. And you've got the tough part really, because you're watching all this crap come down the line. Half of which people should never have given you, and the other half of which people should never have consumed.
Yeah. But that's exactly the point, I think. It's actually, you should never have got it in the first place. We can talk a lot, but we can actually take action. So, what are we going to do? Bugger that. What are you going to do? What action are you actually going to take to make some difference? That you have an option as a consumer to stop, to change. And that, there's 150 plus people in this room. If they all stop buying the Anchor product that is not easy to recycle, Anchor will notice and do something about it. But if you lobby them, they won't. If you stop buying their bloody product, they will.
Can I just ask about tea bags? Tea bags are bad.
I think the Poker brand, you're okay.
The what?
The Poker, the UKA brand, they're okay.
They haven't got plastics in the bag.
Yeah, but we need labelling.
What's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me. Next question. Who's got the mic? Yes.
Yes, I thought it was quite telling that we couldn't really say how much plastic is recycled. Actually, we don't have those numbers, so evidently the industry doesn't have to give them to anyone. But because this is a question that you can fantasize, if you were, king of the world or whatever, is there any way to penalize new plastic that's made from oil and to sort of encourage plastic that's recycled? Because eventually we're just making more and more new plastic all the time, and it's never going to go away.
You mean new varieties of plastic?
So is there some way that if you had the power to do that, to penalize for new plastic?
Are we making new types of plastic all the time?
Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, less than we did way back, but I think you're talking more about the quantity of new virgin plastic materials, right? The constant growth trajectory.
Well, it's talking about
you can influence that. Yeah. So, I mean, there is discussion around plastics taxes, for example, on virgin materials, which helps rebalance, because we were talking about recycling being more expensive than new sometimes. It's extra processing, the collection, sorting, all of that costs money. To balance that out, you could potentially tax virgin plastics to help adjust that. I think some some jurisdictions have done it. Others have done taxes on the non-recyclables going to landfill. So that helps drive the design change to avoid that taxing and like. So there's different mechanisms being talked about globally.
Would the consumer pay that? Because isn't food-grown plastic have to be virgin?
No, it doesn't. It has to be, it's got to be food grade going into the recycling process, and it's got to be a good quality recycling process. This is why we don't do the milk bottle to milk bottle in New Zealand yet. We don't have that level of plant. The PET recycling in New Zealand is food grade level. So there's different levels of equipment, basically, and our processes generally for the non-PET plastics aren't at that level yet. And that's where advanced recycling is being talked about as well, because that takes it back to virgin quality, can extract the additives out of it. But you know, there's pros and cons in that one as well. It's high carbon footprint, for example. So again, you know, there's things you need to look at.
We've just come up from South Canterbury, and South Canterbury waste management includes a very good green waste system, which under this recent change in the regulation on recycling and what goes into green waste has been very badly affected, because all of a sudden we're not able to put in paper towels or cardboard. And the reason I've been told is that a lot of the cardboard, the food packaging for pizzas and the like, has got plastic on it. And therefore they don't want it in their green waste, and that's why it's become a national standard that we're not able to do this. So there's all this cafe tissue, you know, sort of napkins, paper napkins, which were going into the green waste, is now going into landfill. What I want to know is there any way in which you could get the plastic lining out of pizzas so that we could go back to putting it in the green waste?
I think you've been told porky there, quite frankly, because I don't believe the national standardisation on the organics collection is actually defining anything around fibre.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Is it? I thought it was just the plastics that couldn't go in.
And serviettes, and it's more related to my understanding of the toxins and the ink rather than plastic.
Because we can put the paper towels in
And it is definitely part of the national standardisation.
Yeah.
You can no longer compost anything here in Canterbury.
Pizza boxes actually aren't plastic lined and can go in your recycling. So long as they don't have like cheese and what have you. You've got to scrape it off
No,
of it.
they are not being allowed in recycling. We've been told quite clearly. I know cafes that have actually set up a very good process of sending it to green waste, and they've been told no, they cannot do it.
What's your deal on pizza boxes?
So MFE says pizza boxes can go in recycling. Clean pizza boxes, so most of the food out of them, a bit of oil stain.
As long as they've got plastic lining.
Yeah, so the cardboard, you know, we're seeing cardboard because we see cardboard that has a bit of plastic on the outside of it anyway. So from a recycling perspective, your pizza box, minus the pizza, can go in your recycling. The standardisation logic means that regardless of the technology that sits in an area, they're capable of processing that organic or that recycling product, and it flows through pretty well because it actually allows the education that we spoke about before and the consistency of messaging. So it's not helpful because it's changing something, and we generally don't like change. But
for us from South Canterbury, we feel as though we've gone backwards in what we can do, just to keep up with bigger cities, I presume.
I have a question, which is the panel aware of the cases of some litigation, several US Attorney Generals, State Attorney Generals, as well as the recent reports that suggest that, much like big tobacco was misleading around how long they've known that recycling is neither financially viable or particularly efficacious in most cases. I'm not sure that it's, I think you've alluded to it, Gavin, but I'm surprised that it hasn't been raised. It's made a lot of global headlines.
You're suggesting that recycling as a notion is greenwashing?
Well, I'm not. I mean, I'm
I
agreeing.
think you might be.
Okay, I'm interested that internationally there's like serious litigation taking place. Certainly the California Attorney General was the first. I understand 2 other Attorney Generals have since joined that. And they're taking action against both big oil and plastic industries on the basis that they have misled the public. And they have documentation dating back to the 80s, which shows that big plastic, as such, has known for a very long time, but knew that they wouldn't have the social license to continue if there wasn't this idea that us, the consumers, had a responsibility to do this imaginary thing.
I mean, it's like the litter campaign.
Right.
It brought it down to the individual rather than to...
Yes, but not by accident, by design.
Yeah, of course. Okay, Rachel.
Am I aware of it? Yes. Am I paying any attention to it? No, to be quite frank. I run an industry association with 3 FTEs. We have enough to do in New Zealand, and you know, if I actually look at what I'm working on in a single week, the environmental piece is a big piece for us, obviously, but I'm also looking at manufacturing policy, union negotiations, a whole lot of other things. So if I want to avoid working 100 hours a week, I can't focus on that.
But you have also spoken about government subsidies, and as you know, Rob, you would know that this takes a lot of money to make recycling even, you know, wish cycling even remotely possible. Should we be focusing so much on our consumer pressure towards getting the number 5 on the bottom of the sour cream, if the number 5 on the bottom of the sour cream, even if it really is a number 5, is not truly financially viable, and for that matter, certainly not durable once beyond 1 or 2 versions of a recycled object? As you said, it's not an infinite loop. There's no circularity in that.
Yeah.
Sitting here is quite interesting because it's sort of on the periphery of what I do research-wise, but I'm a consumer as well. And it seems to be talking an awful lot about recycling as a sort of excuse for using, rather than going back and saying, well, let's reconsider the use. Let's, instead of incentivising companies to produce plastics that are recyclable and giving them tax relief or whatever, let's incentivise companies to produce plastics that actually do degrade properly, or we shouldn't be using them. So let's look at the use of these things and say, do we really need to wrap our meat in that? Do we really need to do this? And the answer is probably no. But yes, we do need syringes made out of plastic. We do need scalpels made out of plastic because we can sterilise them very efficiently. I've been involved in a study in Nepal quite recently looking at the recycling of plastic instruments in hospitals. And they recycle their plastic instruments in hospitals because they can't afford to buy new ones. And it's actually quite successful. Whereas here we chuck them all away because it's much easier to do that. And I think those are the sort of things we need to think about and kind of move away a bit from the recycling argument, even though I'm just given some of it, and away towards the removal of plastics argument.
It's a tool, but it's not the only tool in the arsenal. We need to start
of course
using
it's not,
others.
but we need to focus a bit more on that as a tool than the recycling tool.
Recycling is great, but I think en masse wish cycling, which I think is what you're talking about, is not, and that's where we need to, what we need to get away from, and that needs to be by educating people more, but us also taking more responsibility as to where our products end up.
Yep, and where products are genuinely recyclable, that's fine, but where a product is stated to be recyclable, home compostable, something like that. Yeah.
So they aren't infinitely recyclable, and
That's right. Yep, they do, yeah.
And they have very finite.
Yeah.
Putting all this blame and guilt and worry, government side, on recycling, I'm thinking about the genuinely recyclable thing. Once you process it properly, turn off the label and done all the rest, and we'll beat ourselves up, we have done it perfectly, and then the system changes and moves, but then a whole new system.
Yes.
Yeah.
So would you be happier if it went to landfill? Because that's pretty much your option.
That's not... That's, yeah.
I don't speak for the global petrochemicals industry. I speak for the New Zealand plastics manufacturers who are converting it. So, it's not something I can comment on in terms of
It would
whether
cost
that
you
is
more.
deliberate or not.
And it would cost you more. Yeah. That's right, but you must do something. And I guess it's not the perfect solution, but to sit there and wait for the perfect solution, I think someone said it before,
Revolution.
It's a case of, that this is the right thing to do, because it really does feel like the right thing to do. We know that the way that we recycle...
I mean, your argument is that this is some kind of band-aid. It's enabling us to carry right on with destroying the environment at a large level, but making us feel better. And it doesn't really matter because it's so minor what we're able to recycle.
Arguably, it could be, but if we don't do something now, then what's left for those future generations? So they can continuing to try to improve, to get things better, means that actually we're doing our part. Because do you want to turn around to your grandchildren when they say, what did you do to try and reduce this impact of the
what we did,
microplastics?
taking words out of your mouth for a moment, I'm sure you don't need me to do that, is, we patched up the system and enabled the plastics industry to carry right on doing whatever it's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the dilemma.
So, a lot of times when we're thinking plastics, think back to the start, right, all those things that I went through, none of those were packaging. So, a lot of these discussions are around packaging. Packaging globally is about 40% of plastics use, which is a lot, but it is not all of it. There's still 60% of what is being used globally that is not packaging, that we have to take circular, all the products and things which aren't just plastics, plastics, metals, glass, etc. If we don't actually transition the system for those products, all of that ends up going one way to a landfill. You've got your developing world, population growth, all of that. We're just going to keep consuming, even if developed nations start actually changing their thinking and reducing consumption. Overall, the rate is still going to grow. So it actually just kind of shoves the problem down the road. So, as Rob said, it's not perfect, but we've got to do something now.
I think getting rid of 40% of the packaging waste isn't shutting it down the road, it's getting rid of a huge problem. I think 40% is a big figure to have a huge amount of plastic that we're throwing out there at the moment.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
We have one more question time. And they're all where I can. No. Just tell me when somebody's got the microphone.
Microphone. Here.
Don't you just ask your question. Don't listen to those bitter people who will never get a chance to ask their question.
Well, I have a request to begin with. If I can speak for about 5 hours time. No! I am to be worth your time. I can.
No, it's not going to happen.
Okay. Thank you. Then I just directly ask the question to EcoCentral. Sorry, I don't remember.
Rob.
I know very well that there is technology where plastic can be converted into petrol, because the plastics are made from oil to begin with, and the side products, the waste that gets out is very less. So I would like to know that has government considered having such plants? I also know that it costs only 10 or 20 cents more than the current fuel prices. So I just want to know whether government has ever considered something.
Whether we can extract petrol from the plastic.
Plastic is made from petrol.
Pyrolysis type of activity, where you do that, Rachel probably knows a gazillion times more about it. We're processors. EcoCentral processes plastic and other commodities and sells those to reprocessors. But waste to energy and those sorts of things, not my sphere.
There is also scope, there's a lot of people wanting to use microorganisms to do that as well, to break down plastics, maybe to either make more plastics or make things like ethanol, which can be used as a new fuel source. It's a great idea. It's economically not very viable, and it takes a huge amount of energy in general to do it. It's still not a great approach. I could get a bacteria that could grade PET and make some new products. It would be sounds very circular. We're used to making more PET, but in reality, the amount of energy going into that system is so much you just wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the advanced recycling sort of bucket. So it's the mechanical recycling needs to come first from a climate perspective, with that secondary. It is being considered in New Zealand by various organisations. Less into fuel, however. They're more looking at plastic to plastic. They're all looking at what we call the polyolefins, which is your ones, your 2s and 4s. So LDPE, HDPE, etc., and your 5s, polypropylene, because those are the easiest ones to turn back into to oil and naphtha. But yeah, I mean, as Gavin says, it costs a lot of money. Even the small scale plants cost a ton of money. So the economics of it is very, very challenging for a very small volume of waste like ours. Because we see it as a big volume, but actually we're piddly in comparison to global, from an economic point of view. So yeah, we may see it in New Zealand, but it's very likely not to go into fuel. It will be what I term waste to feedstock rather than waste to fuel.
That is a wrap.
The question this evening is plastic, how do we live with it? We started off with Kim, quoting Kim Frankel saying we don't have a healthy relationship with plastic, but it is one of the foundations of modern life. And as Rachel has said, our longevity has increased in the last 100 years because of the use of plastic. We've heard that 2/3 of the plastic resins coming into the country are used in packaging, and packaging is 40% of the issue worldwide. There's another 60% that's not just packaging that we have to deal with. We heard that there's 4 million blue whales worth of plastic used in a year. That's scary. And that plastic breaking down in the oceans has the chance of breaking down the capture of half the carbon in our atmosphere. Very scary indeed. We've heard that bioplastics, if we go to bioplastics, we need a cornfield the size of France and a lot more water and energy to make it happen. Ian has asked us to look at the risks and benefits of when we're using plastics and what we're doing. He's pointed out that plastics are held together by plasticizers. The amount of other chemicals could be 16,000. It's a moot point between Rachel and Gavin here. But that plastic, when it breaks down, turns into hormones, which is having a devastating effect on the male alligator. And it's also, unfortunately, lowering the amount of oysters we've got, so there's a bit of correlation there, perhaps. Rob has said some sage things tonight. Make it easy, make it simple and regular. I think they are things well said. Single use of anything is a bad thing. Unless your platform is set on fire, we don't want to jump. So I do expect to see a drop in the sales of cream cheese. And I also, maybe not so many dog shit bags. The big question for me tonight was, did we change the cucumber to support the plastic industry? But the big thing we've got, the big question tonight is from Rob, what are you going to do? So as we go out of here tonight, think about what we're going to do. The other question tonight, go loose. But using plastics sensibly to reduce environmental impacts. That is our future. We need it. It's a love-hate relationship with plastic, but we do need some of it. So on that note, I will now thank Gavin, Rachel, Kim, Ian and Rob. Thank you very much for a very entertaining evening. Another round of applause. My wife finally reminded me that reuse, recycle. Reduce, reduce, reuse, recycle. So go forward and reduce. Thank you very much.
Hot topic next year, and the focus will be something related to energy, and we'll update that in the next few months. So have a good Easter.